You're listening to the Core Factors audio library, spoken versions of Core Factors articles and research. This piece is titled Empathy at Scale: The Next Frontier of Leadership Development. The following narration preserves the original content and context of the written article.
Empathy at Scale: The Next Frontier of Leadership Development. Empathy has long been praised as the cornerstone of outstanding leadership, yet few organizations have known how to develop or scale it effectively. For decades, empathy was treated as a personality trait that leaders either possessed or lacked. However, the way teams connect has evolved, and empathy has evolved with it, from a soft skill into a strategic capability. Empathy drives trust, communication, and engagement. It stabilizes teams during uncertainty and fuels collaboration across differences. Yet even as its value rises, many organizations still struggle to make empathy operational. The future of leadership depends on changing that. Empathy scales through structure by translating emotional intelligence into observable, measurable, and teachable behaviors. The business case for empathy. Empathy delivers measurable business outcomes. Research consistently links empathy to higher engagement, stronger innovation, and lower turnover. Teams led by empathetic managers report greater psychological safety and creativity. Organizations that prioritize empathy see measurable gains in retention and customer satisfaction. One global leadership study found that when leaders demonstrate consistent empathy, engagement scores rise by double digits and burnout risk drops significantly. Gallup's data echoes this pattern. Managers who communicate with empathy are among the strongest predictors of employee engagement across industries. Empathy acts as a force multiplier. It strengthens the social fabric of work and fuels performance. Belonging and psychological safety determine whether people stay or leave, making empathy a core element of business strategy. Why empathy fails to scale. Despite its importance, most organizations admit they do not know how to teach empathy at scale. Empathy appears in leadership competency models, but systems to measure or reinforce it are often missing. 3 barriers explain why this happens. Conceptual. Empathy is still misunderstood as an innate personality trait, rather than a learnable skill. Behavioral. Leaders rarely receive feedback on how empathetic they actually are, creating a gap between intent and impact. Systemic. Most reward systems continue to emphasize efficiency and control over connection and listening. This produces a familiar pattern in emotional intelligence research. Empathy ranks high in importance, but low in demonstrated effectiveness. This is known as the development gap, the difference between what leaders value and what they demonstrate. McKinsey's workforce research highlights another obstacle: empathy fatigue. Leaders face constant emotional demands while balancing performance pressure with team well-being. Without structured development and recovery, empathy becomes depleted. Measurement and practice matter because empathy must be treated as a renewable capability, not an emotional resource leaders simply expend. Making empathy measurable: the 4 quadrants in action. To operationalize empathy, organizations need a framework that connects awareness with behavior. Core Factors EQ Accelerator uses the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence to translate empathy from concept to measurable practice. Self-awareness. Empathy begins with recognizing one's own emotional state. Leaders who identify their biases, assumptions, and stress triggers create space to listen objectively. Self-regulation. Even well-intentioned leaders can block empathy when emotions take over. Regulation sustains patience and composure in high-pressure moments. Other awareness. This is empathy's core dimension. It reflects the ability to perceive and interpret others' emotions accurately, especially when they differ from one's own. Other engagement. True empathy extends beyond recognition to response. It is demonstrated through acknowledgement, validation, and supportive communication. When empathy is measured across these quadrants, organizations can see how leaders experience and express connection. Aggregated data reveals not just who demonstrates empathy, but how it functions within the culture. For example, a team scoring high in other awareness but low in other engagement may understand one another well, yet fail to act on that understanding. Widespread deficits in self-regulation can indicate emotional overload among managers, undermining their ability to sustain empathy under stress. Using the 4 quadrants as a diagnostic lens gives organizations a complete picture of where empathy thrives and where it falters. From individual skill to organizational system. Scaling empathy requires embedding it into leadership systems rather than relying solely on individual training. Forward-thinking organizations treat empathy as a practice reinforced through culture design, performance management, and peer interaction. 3 levers help move empathy from personal to systemic. Modeling. Senior leaders set the tone. When they demonstrate transparency and genuine curiosity, empathy becomes a visible leadership norm. Feedback. Continuous feedback loops, supported by tools like the EQ Accelerator, show leaders how their empathy is perceived and where they can grow. Data turns abstract ideals into actionable improvement. Culture design. Policies and rituals that reward collaboration, listening, and inclusion communicate that empathy is expected and valued. Organizations that integrate empathy into performance systems report stronger engagement and faster recovery from disruption. Deloitte's leadership research notes that cultures emphasizing empathy outperform peers in innovation and adaptability. In practice, empathy serves as a productivity enabler. Empathy and psychological safety. Empathy and psychological safety are deeply interconnected. Each supports the other. Without empathy, leaders cannot create safety. Without safety, empathy cannot flourish. The American Psychological Association found that employees who feel heard and understood are significantly less likely to experience chronic stress. Research from Workplace Options shows that empathy-driven communication reduces interpersonal conflict and improves morale, especially in hybrid teams. This connection makes empathy a leadership imperative. When people believe their leaders care about their experiences, they are more likely to take risks, share ideas, and recover from setbacks. Empathy builds the emotional infrastructure of innovation. For practitioners, developing empathy as a leadership capability. For trainers, consultants, and coaches, developing empathy requires a balance of data, dialogue, and deliberate practice. Leaders cannot simply be told to be more empathetic. They must understand how empathy appears in their behavior and how it affects others. Practical ways to develop empathy include using emotional data to measure other awareness and other engagement, identifying strengths and blind spots, pairing data with stories through 360 feedback or peer coaching, teaching micro behaviors such as active listening, perspective taking, and acknowledgement. Integrating reflection by asking questions like, whose perspective did I not consider? Embedding empathy in growth systems by linking it to promotion criteria, coaching frameworks, and team evaluations. When empathy becomes observable and measurable, development becomes continuous. Practitioners can demonstrate how improvements in empathy correlate with engagement, retention, and team satisfaction. This provides evidence that emotional connection drives organizational health. The future of scalable empathy. Empathy at scale means creating a shared language of understanding across roles, functions, and geographies. It means building systems that enable people to recognize and respond to one another as humans first, even amid complexity. The next generation of leadership development will treat empathy as a strategic capability. Through frameworks like the EQ Accelerator's 4 quadrants, organizations can measure and strengthen the emotional capacities that define trust, collaboration, and adaptability. Empathy is a measurable behavior and a teachable skill. When organizations develop it with the same rigor applied to strategy or innovation, empathy becomes an enduring advantage.
This concludes the audio version of this Core Factors article, and you can read the full written version and explore related research at corefactors.com.